Hello, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural first episode of Fourth and Gold right here on Beyond the Big Ten. My name is Joey Christopoulos. This is the place for Minnesota Gopher football. We're coming at you live on a Monday, a Victory Monday, so let's bring in our co-host here. He is Big Ten Network's very own. He is former Minnesota Gopher standout, former NFL player. It's Brock Vereen. Hello, Brock.
Fourth and Gold, what a name. What a fantastic name, and what a place to be. This is, we were just talking, Victory Mondays are hard to come by in the Big Ten. Victory Mondays are hard to come by when you look at the schedule that Minnesota is sitting with this season, and they should be celebrated, as should their second half performance from this most recent Saturday.
Oh, we're going to dive into the later, but let's stay in the here and now right now as the Gophers pick up a huge, as we said a little bit before when you hopped onto the Northwestern podcast last week, a must-win for the Gophers, 35-24 over Louisiana. You teased it a little bit, so I just want to get your emotions. Give us the first blush thoughts. You were in the booth, Brock. You were calling the game. So maybe let's start with, how are you feeling after that first drive? They go up 7-0. How are you feeling at the half?
Calling a game of a school that you went to is my second time doing it now, and there's always the golden rule is you have to be impartial, you have to be neutral, but there is that 0.0001% of you that is still, if I had to pick a team to win, maybe it would be the team that I used to play for. So, but it always keeps the emotions high. You never have to worry about bringing energy in those games because that will just come naturally. The first half, coming off of a devastating loss in I don't know if it was a historical comeback victory, but I know in the Fleck era it absolutely was. And you always want to see, okay, what is this team going to look like from the very first play? Can you prove that what happened last week is behind you? Can you prove that wasn't who this team actually is? And you get nervous when it's a slow start. You get nervous when you go into the half and you haven't put on your best performance. So you could collectively feel the entire stadium rising and falling as the game went on. It was homecoming, and for whatever reason, Minnesota has struggled with homecoming games recently. So that's also in the air. And thankfully, they came out in the second half and really righted the ship, made tons of adjustments that we'll get into later. But in regards to strictly the emotions of the game, it went from, let's prove that last week was a different team. Okay, are we sure last week was a different team? Because we are not off to a hot start. Going into halftime, everyone feeling this can't be another homecoming disappointment, can it? And then about halfway through the third quarter, everyone realizing, okay, adjustments have been made. Things will be all right. We can still enjoy our Saturday homecoming night because it looks like they're going to win, and then eventually they do.
Yeah, the Gophers were able to pull it off and give everyone a really great homecoming weekend. So let's just dive into that right now and talk a little bit about those second half adjustments. Let's get right into our X's and O's. Right here on X's and O's here on Fourth and Gold. This is the section here where Brock's going to break down what happens in the game, what he saw, what he liked, what he didn't like, and how maybe the Gophers need to improve moving forward. So as we mentioned previously, they walked into the halftime down 17-14, right? You walk in, you lose to a game to Northwestern last week that you didn't really see coming. You're reeling, and then you have to play this football game, the homecoming game, without Darius Taylor, a guy who's already been Big Ten Freshman of the Week 3 times already this season. And, oh, yeah, we've only played 4 games. So they were up. So the Gophers were up against it, right? You walk into that half down 17-14. So, what did you see on both sides of the ball, honestly, Brock? Whichever side you want to start with first. What did they do in that locker room and then to be able to come back out, take control of this game, and, win going away?
Well, we'll start with Darius Taylor because his absence was obviously the biggest story. Once everyone realized that he wasn't going to be playing, they listed him as questionable. We were there at practice on Friday. Obviously, you never break that code, but in the back of your mind, I'm thinking there's no way that he's playing in this game. Let's see what happens. What they did get was Zach Evans, who was, from a standard of local hype, he was the original Darius Taylor, in that when he committed to Minnesota, they said, okay, Minnesota got a gem. This guy's going to be special. And he gets hurt in camp. And then the following year, okay, Zach Evans, this is his time. Everyone's really excited. Now, granted, Mo Ibrahim was there throughout this entire time, and no one is going to take Mo's spot, but there was an excitement to see what the future held. and he got hurt again. And we had not seen him yet this season through the first couple of games. He was with the travel squad. He was suited up. He just didn't enter the game. He was the star of the show. And when he scored his first touchdown in his first game, contributing as a Minnesota Gopher, the stadium went crazy, and you saw the old lineman celebrating just a little extra because everyone knew the path that he had to take to get to the field. Runs hard. His lateral quickness is beyond impressive, and he can lower that shoulder. May not have the separation speed, but if he's popping off 20 yards before you can catch him, he's fast enough, right? So he was the star of the show offensively. Sean Tyler, who was originally the starter. I mean, if we're talking snap one versus Nebraska in week 1 on that Thursday night, you thought, okay, here's running back 1. Did well. He's a guy who has to get to the line of scrimmage clean to really make the biggest impact. Smaller stature, speedy guy. And against Eastern Michigan, put the ball on the ground a couple times, and that's going to make any coach hesitant, which his not benching, although he only had a couple of carries since that Eastern Michigan game, but by all means, they gave Darius Taylor an opportunity to be the guy, and he took it and ran with it. So that's the running back story that got us from week 1 as we enter into week 6. So the running backs look great. Minnesota's always going to have one. Darius Taylor hopefully will return, but if not, we saw enough to know that Zach Evans can get it done. Defensively, it was 2 games from North Carolina Northwestern where it just didn't look like a Joe Rossi defense, right? Yep. Historically, in the PJ Fleck era, offense has been so-so. It's been great at times. It's been slow at times. But knowing that you have a top 10 defense nationally, you can still win football games, which they've had no problem doing. And that just has not been the case. Going into the Louisiana game, they had given up over 800 yards and 6 touchdowns in the air. Which is just not what a Joe Rossi defense looks like. And in the first half, they were put in some tough spots with the slow start to the offense, but by all means, Louisiana looked like the faster team. And what happened in the second half is Joe Rossi said, okay, we're just going to blitz. Louisiana was down to their second quarterback, the best athlete on the field, just a freak of nature. And they were not able to contain him. And if you can't contain an athletic quarterback, then you have to blitz him. And that's what they did. So credit to Joe Rossi, where the game plan, you practice it again and again and again, but credit to him for putting the pride aside and saying, okay, this is not working. We're going to try something else. And that's what led them to victory, was saying, what we were doing is not working. We're going to try something new. And he's not one to blitz often. He was blitzing a ton. That's why they won the game.
Well, he was pushing the right buttons, right? Because nothing gets the offense more juiced up than in the second half, Louisiana's possessions were turned it over on downs, interception, punt, interception, and then, of course, that touchdown late. So they were able to get it done on that side of the ball and let the offense work. I just want to dip back to the offense just really quickly. You talked about Zach Evans. Zach Evans, 15 carries, 85 yards and a touch. Bryce Williams also got 15 carries, 53 yards and a touch too as well. They ran the ball, Brock, 51 times for 201 yards. Now, of course, when you get in the second half, you're just trying to grind down that clock, right? Not trying to take too many chances. But, I just want to get your take. You brought up such an interesting point about how the offensive line rallied around Zach Evans when he found, the end zone. And when you're out your best offensive player, when he's not in the lineup, and you're kind of got your back up against the wall, I want to know, take us inside the locker room when something like that happens. When you're down your best guy and you can rally, I mean, you have to think the offensive line took that as a real challenge, right? And certain guys stepped up. And I'm not saying we're going to get to next week's game, but there are plenty other games on the slate, right, where you have to come together as a team, whether you have your best player, whether you have us in a good game or bad game. So this is an interesting not a blueprint, but it does have to galvanize the locker room that, hey, we can get it done even if our best guy might not be at 100% or out there at all.
I will always stand on this, even though a lot of coaches will never admit it. A perfect game for a head coach is winning but getting popped in the mouth, because you want to know, hey, it would be wonderful to go out and win every game 100-0. I get that. But football is a tough sport, physically and mentally. And anytime you can have your team tested mentally and you get the win, that's a perfect situation, especially leading through what remains only Big Ten opponents in a wide open Big Ten West. So you come in shorthanded, and if I were to go into that locker room, I would say, hey guys, you can't allow a freshman being injured to derail your season, right? Obviously, Darius is the best offensive weapon. If he never played another down for the remainder of the season, he still might be the Big Ten Freshman of the Year. Like that's the impact that he's had so far. It's been incredible. But I would assume, meaning if I were in that locker room, I would not allow us to hang our heads, allowing a freshman to lower morale, right? Like there has to be a sense of pride being, this guy just got here. There's no way our season can be derailed by a guy who just got here and just started getting significant carries. While Chris Ottman-Bell didn't play, he's been there for so long. Brevin Spanford may not have lit up the stat sheet, but he's been there for so long. There's so many guys who are 6-7 year dudes who you can rely on to mentally keep the team afloat, keep them from hanging their head. And again, I reiterate, it's no disrespect to Darius. It's just the fact of, you just got here. If a guy just getting here makes us feel less confident, then we're not going to be confident for the remainder of the season. So guys stepped up, both young and veterans. Daniel Jackson had an incredible game. The senior there made some massive plays, looked unguardable at moments. And when one of your stars goes down, it's an opportunity for other guys to make some big plays in case that star does not return before the next game. That's exactly what happened.
Yeah, for the coaching staff, you're totally right. They get a W on homecoming. You own the time of possession by over 11 minutes. You get some teach tape, right, that you can take into the next week. And on top of that, they played clean football, right? Like, they didn't shoot themselves in the foot. I think they only had one penalty in the entire game. Louisiana had maybe 6 or 7. Before we move on to the scouting report and start looking forward to next week, of course, you know, when you talk about football these days, you have to talk about the quarterback. So I just want to get your take on, you know, how Calic Manis played. 12 of 14. Was able to toss a couple of touchdowns in the game, only for 146 yards. My last name's Christopoulos, Brock, so methinks that guy might be Greek. So talk
better believe it.
talk about my Greek brother, right? I mean, obviously, he did what he needed to do, right? But give us a little take of what you thought of his performance.
I go back to week 1 versus Nebraska. Thursday night, all eyes on them, and they come out and throw the ball 44 times, I believe it was. In hindsight, they threw the ball that many times, not because they wanted to, but because they had to. We now know that Nebraska's defensive front, although Michigan absolutely took it to them, going into last week, Nebraska had the number 1 rush defense. So maybe we got a little ahead of ourselves in thinking, okay, Minnesota's going to come out chucking the ball every single game. This is a new look team. They got a quarterback with a massive arm. And while he does have a massive arm, they threw the ball that many times because they had to that game. That is not who they're going to be going forward. That being said, Ethan did exactly what he was asked. The frustration that came from the Northwestern game had to do with the conservative play calling. And what I loved is that they were much more aggressive in this game. The stats may not necessarily show it because he didn't throw it a ton of times, but going back to Northwestern, their lead was just diminishing by the minute. And there was a situation where they were on Northwestern's 37-yard line, I believe, and they punted the football. Northwestern eventually goes on to win that game. And it's moments like that where we understand what Minnesota football is. It's controlling the clock, it's not making mistakes, and it's not taking too many risks. But that's a moment where it's, hey, you get behind your offensive line and you get the first. You pound the rock and you get the first. I believe it was a 4th and 3. And they elected to punt and they lose that game. There was a situation against Louisiana. They were on Louisiana's, I believe it was 38-yard line. and the entire stadium started to get a little angsty, not knowing what was going to happen, and they kept the offense out there. Ethan Kaliak-Manis throws a dart to Daniel Jackson, and he gets a receiving touchdown, right? That's what I wanted to see. It was the difference in mindset of we have to be conservative because our quarterback's still filling things out to no, we're going to trust our quarterback to put this game away. And while Louisiana did score after that, the emphatic stamp was on the game of we're going to remain aggressive, we're going to put it away, and they won. So that's what I wanted to see. I don't need Ethan to go out there and throw for 500 yards a game and 20 touchdowns. That's not what we need to see. We just need to see, hey, when your backs are against the wall, can you trust him to go out there and make a play? And he did. And that was the biggest takeaway from the game for me in regards to the quarterback position.
Yeah, execution when you get your moment to take your shots, right? If you're going to be a run-heavy outfit, you're setting everything up to dial up a couple of those plays and make those throws when they need to happen. And then, yeah, Daniel Jackson, 5 catches for 89 yards and 2 touchdowns in this game, too, as well. They certainly delivered on that front. Brockman, I think it's time. It's time to roll forward to our next segment, the Scouting Report. Here comes the Scouting Report right here on 4th and Gold with former Minnesota Gopher superstar Brock Vereen. Let's just start first. Let's keep it in-house. Let's keep it in the Gophers' house just for the moment. Let's talk about the health of the team right now. Darius Taylor and maybe some guys that are coming back right now. I know, look, we're taping this on a Monday right now. People might be listening to this on a Wednesday. We don't know if we're going to find out maybe till later in the week, but where are you leaning right now? If you're going to the window in Vegas, is Taylor going to make it? What's the health of this team at this time?
One thing that has to be factored in is that they have a bye week after Michigan. So it's riskier than it looks, meaning do you want your best players out there against the number 2 team of the country? Of course you do. Would you be kicking yourself if your best players further injured themselves and now are no longer there for the remainder of the season against the number 2 team in the country where it's going to take everything going your way to win? Yes, you would. So they have a tough decision to make. Because if Darius Taylor does not play, including the bye week, that'll be 3 weeks of rest. You can absolutely assume that he will be in great shape for the remainder of the year. So that's what's at stake here. Does Darius Taylor want to play? Of course. Do his coaches and his offense and defense want him to play? Of course. Do Minnesota fans and students want him to play? You better believe it. But that is why this isn't a tougher decision than it may seem. It's not just trying to beat Michigan. It's winning the Big Ten West. It's going to a bowl game. It's trying to extend that 9-win streak to 3 seasons. So that's why it's so tough. You also have Chris Bell, who doesn't have... I know he doesn't have a reception. He may not have a target yet on the season. He's suited up, but he has not been himself. He's technically started games, but he's entered games, or he started games and then exited the game right away. It's obvious that he's not himself, still recovering from that knee injury from a year ago, and he did not even dress last week. It's also Cody Lindenberg, who they call the best player on their defense. Yes, a defense with potential first-round pick Tyler Nubin linebacker. Cody Lindenberg is the best player. He had a hamstring injury during camp. We have not seen him yet this year. So those are 3 names that, if they were all 3 playing against Michigan, would you feel better about them pulling off what would be considered a pretty big upset? Absolutely. But do you want to risk losing them 3 for the remainder of the year if they further their injuries? You would just kick yourself, man. It's bigger than just beating Michigan. It's bigger than just the Little Brown Jug, which is a trophy that has eluded Minnesota quite a bit in recent years. And that's what's at stake. So I know it doesn't exactly answer the question. I know everyone wants to hear all 3 of them are healthy. They're all going to play, but it's a lot. There's a lot more at stake here at the halfway point of the season.
Can I just follow up real quick? I want you to bring us into the mindset of the player really quick. When you talk about hamstring injuries, so I've asked other former athletes from all across different sports about the hamstring, and the word tricky gets thrown around like it's a very cliched thing. But can you just kind of follow up a little bit on that? When you're talking about trying to bring a guy back, especially when you're trying to maybe bring him back against a team like Michigan. You know, you got to be really careful of that hamstring, right? Because if it goes again, you lose him for an even longer stretch of time. You certainly don't want to go under the knife with a hamstring injury. So, did you ever deal with one in your career? And can you just talk about how tenuous that is to manage that particular injury?
I was always very lucky with hamstrings in that I never had any hamstring snags until the very end of my years playing football, which is a blessing because the majority of people do. And a hamstring, it's actually wider. It's just soft tissue things. You never want soft tissue because it's a gray area. It's why they always say you would rather break a bone, you'd rather break an ankle than sprain an ankle, right? Like, while ankle isn't a soft tissue, it's if a bone breaks, it heals because that's what the body does. And while it may seem that a bone would always be at risk, bones heal stronger a lot of the times, right? I remember my brother broke his collarbone in high school. And we were so nervous, like, oh man, is it going to be something that he has to worry about? The doctor's like, no, it's going to be impossible to break again. Like, that collarbone is going to be steel because the human body is just weird, man. The human body is weird. Don't try to understand.
Shout out to the human race.
Exactly. But because of that, soft tissue is tricky, man. It comes down to. It comes down to everybody's body being different. It comes down to blood circulation. It comes down to how
tissue,
much
right?
Scar tissue is the
Yeah.
it's this moving target, which is why some people pull a hamstring and are back out there in 2 weeks. Some people pull a hamstring and redshirt. Like it's just it's such a tricky thing, and also what makes it tricky is that all you can go off of is the word of the player, which puts players in a tough position because it always says, "Oh, he's not tough. He's been nursing a hamstring all year." Whereas, what about that other guy? He pulled his hamstring. He was only out 2 weeks. It's different, and a lot of people don't understand that. Now, you brought up a good point. You never want to go under the knife. If you go under the knife for a soft tissue situation, it rarely will ever be 100% again, because that's just how weird soft tissue is. So. For Cody Lindenberg, I would tell him, who's still, I don't even think he redshirted his freshman. He has so much eligibility left. He's an NFL type talent. God forbid he has to go under the knife. God forbid this hamstring gets worse. I hope he thinks big picture. And knowing Fleck and those coaches, they always have their guys back. There would never be a situation where they pressure him into doing something that he doesn't want to do. So all that being said, to fill in the avid football fan who may not be up to speed on how the human body works and why things are so tricky and why a guy can break his leg and maybe be back before a guy who tore his hamstring, because the human body is weird. Let that be the thesis of our inaugural episode here. The body's weird.
That's the name of episode 1, Brock. The human body is weird. We'll let people take it. We'll take people however they want. But look, I think that's the kind of perspective I think that Gopher fans need to hear right now, because you're saying, and what I'm hearing right now is this guy might have a fantastic legacy, possibly. Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves, but a fantastic, possibly legacy-building career in Minnesota. Yeah. And if he's healthy right now, and you've got a bye week coming up next week, it might not be the worst thing to just say, hey, let's just be double sure here. Get these 2 weeks and then get him in the building, and then he's practicing full speed. He's ready to go, game plan ready, not really thinking about it anymore, and then maybe he can roll and finish up the rest of the season strong. It's time, man. I got to do it. We got to force you. It's time to talk about Michigan. Here we go. So, look, I mean, I just want to throw some numbers out at you.
Yes.
And let's just see kind of, where we land on this. Now, obviously, Minnesota, thanks to Darius Taylor, thanks to this excellent performance, it takes a village, right, of the running back group that came out, especially Zach Evans last week. They're the 5th best rushing team in the Big Ten. And look, people, in the Big Ten, that is saying something, because that is the calling card, is running the football. Fifth right now in the Big Ten, 193 yards a game. Michigan, though, 2nd in only allowing 85.6 rushing yards a game. And to this point, now look, obviously, I want to get your opinion a little bit on how some of these teams like to, let's just say, get their opponents together early on in the season. But Michigan right now is allowing only 6 points a game, Brock. They have not allowed over 10 points a game to a single opponent. So maybe let's just start here. Talk a little bit about that Michigan defense and what the Gopher offense is going to have to go up against this weekend.
So Michigan, historically has not, maybe not historically, that may not be fair. In recent years, has not exactly beefed up their non-conference schedule. That changes next year, by the way, where they, yes. I forget if they go to Texas or Texas comes to them, but there's a home and home with Texas, so they will be able to shake that stigma from here on out, hopefully. Going into Rutgers and then into Nebraska, I would say Michigan's defense proved we're as good as advertised, right? They beat up on East Carolina. They beat up on UNLV. They struggled quite a bit against Bowling Green before finally separating. And there's an asterisk next to those stats, right? Not next to the performances, because a win is a win, but it's like, hey, if a star quarterback goes out and throws for 500 yards against an FCS school, you're always going to take it with a grain of salt, right? You're not going to expect that every week. But after the performance against Rutgers, who can run the ball against anyone but Michigan, against Nebraska, who can run the ball against anybody but Michigan, yeah, you have to take them at face value. They are the real deal. They are loaded with talent in that front seven. Mike Morris, especially, just a mountain, and will be a first round pick. Could have been a maybe a late day one without question, early day two guy. If he entered the draft last year, he decided to come back and solidify that day one status, which he is doing. The problem with Michigan, facing Michigan, is, okay, what if we don't run the ball? What if we're a pass first team? Well, you have probably the best DB room in the entire Big Ten. You have Mike Sainristil, who can play any position. He was a receiver, then he was a safety, then he was a corner, then he was a nickel. He's just everywhere, and number 0 will make you hurt if you give him an opportunity to make a play. Will Johnson, he had some nagging injuries entering the year, just now getting his feet under him. I'm not going to call him the best cornerback in the Big Ten right now because he's been so banged up, and some other guys like Kalen King have emerged as day one guys. But Will Johnson has the highest ceiling in regards to every cornerback currently in the Big Ten who will be the closest thing to a finished product by the time it's their time to get drafted. He's just a sophomore. It's Will Johnson, and he's scary. He is terrifying. Makari Page, massive 6'3" frame back there at safety, big time hitter. There are no weaknesses, is what I'm getting at. Yeah. You have to have your best day. And you have to hope that for the first time really all year, they have a bad day. And it's not impossible to beat them because anything can happen on a Saturday. But by far, this will be the toughest test that Minnesota will face in regards to defense.
So let's get after it here. You know, I feel like with games like this, you know, I'm not gonna back you into a corner here and ask for a final score, right? And look, currently the spread right now is 20.5. It's a lot, right? So I kind of want to just frame it as this, you know, and maybe this brings a full circle to the point that you made earlier on in the show about how you know, the coaching staff, we got a W, but we got some great tape to look at and try and get better as a team. If Minnesota plays this weekend, and let's just say they don't walk out with a victory, you know, what is going to be the key? In your opinion, offensively or defensively, pick whichever one that you want. That's going to keep them, you know, in the room. That's going to keep them in the ring. That's going to maybe help them go 12 rounds with a team like Michigan. That when they go into the bye week, they can come back and be like, "Man, we're moving this program forward, and now we can compete and beat anybody." What's going to be the key to that?
You frame it so perfectly because the Big Ten West is chaos. It's always a mess, and it's always going to come down to the last 2 weeks, if not the last week. Well, actually, no, it always comes down to the last week because technically Minnesota was in it that late a year ago before Purdue ended up winning. So you want to be able to say that we ran the ball against Michigan because no one's been able to do that. And if Minnesota can say maybe we didn't win the game, but we moved the rock on the ground, that gives you confidence for the remainder of the season, saying there's no one who's going to stop us on the ground. And if Minnesota can run the football, they can control the clock, and they have a chance to win every remaining game. So if they can enter this game and have an average 4 yards a carry, which by Michigan standards is saying 20
great.
yards a carry.
Yeah.
But if they can come out saying, we didn't get the win, but we ran the ball for 4 yards a pop, and if they can say defensively they limited big plays and kept tabs on Roman Wilson, who basically has a 50% touchdown success rate in regards to receptions, almost every other catch of his is a touchdown. If they can say that, they can say, you know what? There are better receivers than Roman Wilson, but we have the confidence knowing we just stopped a dude, right? Like, we just stopped a legit guy, and that gives the secondary, who's struggled mightily in the past couple weeks, specifically UNC and Northwestern. They did a little better against Louisiana, but there were still plenty of moments that I feel Joe Rossi will be disappointed with. We have confidence for the remainder of this schedule. Yes, even with the Ohio States and whoever may be remaining on that schedule. So it's about, there's no such thing in moral victories, I always say, but there is such thing as gaining confidence even in defeat. And if they can move Michigan's front seven, and if they can limit the big plays to Roman Wilson, and if they can force J.J. McCarthy to make mistakes, which other than the Bowling Green game, he doesn't really make mistakes. Yeah. Those are things you can hang your hat on and say, we're on the right track, because, again, the Big Ten West will come down to the final week.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement with you when it comes to moral victories, right? When you lose any football game or any sport or whatever, it should piss you off, right? But when it comes to these litmus-type games, you can continue to refine the formula, right, Brock? You can continue to try and build the blueprint of how you're going to go out there and you're going to beat teams on a weekly basis. And this is that kind of test, right? And you're right, man. If they can move the chains a little bit running the football against Michigan, they should be able to do it against anybody in the country on any day of the week, right? And that's kind of something that's something that's going to be out there in front of them, and something they could possibly achieve heading into the bye week. We're going to get you out of here, Brock, on our last segment called Word on Campus. All right, Word on Campus here. This is a segment where we we can walk down memory lane. This is kind of an open-ended section here for Brock to just take us into a little bit about his career and some of the things that he experienced as a player on the field. So, I don't know, man. I felt like obligated to ask you about it. I mean, have you ever been involved in a game when there was a 20-point spread, in deficit or in favor? And honestly, like I'm kind of curious. What are the players in the locker room? What are they talking about? What is the mindset right now? What is the attitude? What is the edge that they're trying to gain this week? Because everyone on the planet, even us, is just like, well, we'll see what happens. But I guarantee you those guys in that locker room are trying to shock the world. So have you ever been a part of a situation like that? And what is the mindset when you walk into a game like this?
Freshman year, we were facing an Ohio State Terrell Pryor-led team. As you can imagine, not many people thought Minnesota was going to win that game. And we didn't. We lost pretty drastically. But as the years went on, you learn as you go from the young guy to the starter to the leader of the room to one of the leaders of the defense. You learn that you set the tone early in the week. I feel a mistake that a lot of people make is saying our opponent is nameless and faceless, right? That's a mindset for the team who's favored, because that helps you not take any team lightly. When you're the team who may need a miracle or two to pull off a game, like facing off against a Terrell Pryor or a J.J. Watt, it is a situation where you admit, yeah, no one expects us to win. Even people who you go to class with, maybe your roommate, maybe your professors, like none of them expect you to win. But what you focus on is having success early. It's about having belief. An upset can't happen if the team not favored doesn't believe early. You have to either score first, you have to have a big hit, you have to have an interception, you have to have a moment that reminds you during the game, okay, these guys are human, right? And even if you find yourself down 10-13 going into half, if you man, remember if you have a memory saying, man, remember that first play when we popped that running back? Man, remember when we had back-to-back sacks? Man, remember when you had an interception? Those are the things that you have to that they have to happen early so that it can motivate the team through the remainder of the game, even if things stop going your way. So that's why you always see a team that historically is a pass first team come out in a triple option early on. That's why you see a flea flicker on the second play of the game. That's why you see an onside kick, because coaches understand we have to have success early, because that is the spark. You can watch all the film in the world. You can tell them all week long, we can get these guys, we can get these guys. But at the end of the day, until the team sees it, they won't truly believe it. And after you have something that you can hang your hat on early on in the game, anything is possible.
That's so interesting when you bring that up. So, like, when you talk about, the flea flicker early in the game, obviously you're trying to do it because you're trying to, get that extra play. You know what I mean? But what you're trying to do is, like, it's so interesting how you're bringing this up. Is like you're trying to humanize your opponent. When you walk into something and like, oh, they have a perfect record. Like Terrell Pryor going to the NFL. You hear all this hype. You start to kind of like mythologize your opponent a little bit, which is exactly what you don't want to do. And what you're talking about is, if you get that pop on the first series, you get them on their heels, you get them actually showing human emotions like fear or doubt, and you can humanize the opponent, then all of a sudden, maybe you get a little more even Steven. It neutralizes it, and maybe that gives you a chance to shock the world.
Last thing, I remember talking to a coach. He was an offensive coordinator, and he said whenever it was a non-Power 5 offensive coordinator, and he said, we always play Power 5 teams because there's a nice paycheck and because we want our guys to play in as many big games as possible. And what he always did as an offensive coordinator is targeted the defense's best NFL-bound player the first play of the game. If they had a D-end who was headed to the NFL, he would always run a sweep that way. If they had a standout cornerback, they would throw a fade the first play of the game. And he would say, I knew the risk of that corner getting an interception or that defensive end having a tackle for loss, but I had to instill the confidence early, because if my receiver makes a play on that corner, the rest of that offense responds to it saying, okay, they're just human. If we have success on that sweep play and my right tackle is able to seal off that defensive end or that outside backer, it was always worth the risk of the confidence boost that comes with going after their top players. So it's something that some coaches believe in, letting their guys in on the strategy in building confidence. But it's also something that coaches don't reiterate to their team. It's like Santa Claus on Christmas. You almost don't want to give away the magic. You just want to call the play and have the guys make a play, and then everyone, oh my God, I thought that corner was supposed to be this, and this. So to any game where you would consider the team not favored to win an upset, I would always challenge people, focus on the play calling and see if this is a coach who is going after the best player because they want that confidence to be instilled in the rest of the team. But I can't wait. I'm a fan of defensive football, so even though I'm a Gopher fan and always will be, I'm a fan of watching great defenses do their thing. So I'm excited to see the challenge that 8th and Caliac Madness is going to face, and it's going to be a fun Saturday night.
It's great stuff. I mean, they got a challenge in front of them, and then after that, the Gophers go on the bye week. That's going to do it for our first episode of 4th and Gold right here on Beyond the Big Ten, your digital platform to go beyond the game with some of the best talent that we have around. You can check us out wherever you get your podcasts. If you like this show, tell a friend. You can follow us at Beyond the Big Ten. Brockman, so great to have you on this journey here moving forward. We're so excited to get your insight all season long, man. Throw out your socials, whatever shout outs that you want to do. The human race is weird, my man. This was really fun. and we're gonna come back soon, and we're gonna break it all down.
You got it, man. Twitter at Brock Vereen. And if you have any questions about the human body being weird, never hesitate.
Never hesitate, you guys. This was 4th and Gold. Thanks for checking us out. Be well, be safe, be good to each other. We'll see you soon.